I hate that kind of talk. It's intemperate and it's dishonest and it's stupid.
Tom?
But
Strong.
oh,
wait, here's the but. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't miss this. Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Thursday, February 20th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Babin and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, Tom, Mitch McConnell made news today by saying he would not run again for his Senate seat. Not really unexpected, but still kind of a big story. What do you make of it?
Well, it is a big story in the sense that, I mean, he's had a historic run, I think 7 terms, and as a fixture in the leadership in the Senate. I mean, he has been the leader of the Republican Party, if you will, for a long, long time. You're right, this was not unexpected. He had obviously suffered health issues and, quite frankly, a deterioration in his standing within the party. I mean, he is really, there were challenges to his leadership. His favorable ratings are absolutely abysmal. Particularly even among Republicans. And so McConnell goes out with sort of a bittersweet legacy. On one hand, obviously, he did some, I remember when he was in the good graces of conservatives because he fought a valiant battle to keep Merrick Garland off the bench under, withering pressure from the media and from the Democrats. That was probably, I think, will go down as one of his high points as far as conservatives are concerned. And here you have him on the way out the door voting against all these Trump nominees, being one of the only very few Republicans to vote against a number of these Trump nominees. So he's leaving, I would say, on a low point as far as the sort of rank and file of the Republican Party is concerned.
Yeah. Well, Carl, is this just a Washington story in that he also just overstayed his time in the Senate? I mean, he certainly was having health problems, and as we said at the beginning, this is not unexpected. But what do you make of his retirement?
Well, Tom said he's standing with conservatives in the Republican Party is not, very high. That's an interesting word, conservative, because it's a little more subtle than that. McConnell came to Washington. Ronald Reagan was president, and Reagan was a guy. Tom's not old enough to remember this, but you are, Andy. He took the Republican Party by storm. It was a takeover of the Republican Party by the Reaganites, and they were very conservative. You'd had this old guard, the Rockefeller wing of the party he swept it away. And for right up until even through 2016, when Donald Trump's running for the first time and, laying waste to that field and kind of shocked everybody, these guys were all saying, there's this great clip of them at the Reagan Library. I'm going to be Reagan. No, I'm going to be Reagan. No, I'm going to be Reagan. Trump sort of paid lip service to that. It was pretty clear he didn't want to be Reagan. He wanted to be Trump, and he has remade the party in his image, and that's still an evolving process. We don't know quite what that means, but you'd be hard pressed to say somebody's more conservative than Mitch McConnell. They may not be in good graces of MAGA, which is an evolving ideology that is altering, I think, both parties. And in terms of McConnell, I wish Howard Feynman was still alive. He wrote for us. The last job how he had was for us, and he was a wonderful political writer. People may remember him on MSNBC and wrote for Newsweek. Howard was liberal, and he wrote a blistering column about McConnell. He was disappointed in McConnell, but I just wish Howard had lived to see this, because I think he would have really loved what McConnell's doing now, voting against these problematic nominees, problematic in the minds of liberals in the media and the old Republican guard.
Well, we've got a lot to get to today. I want to move on. I want to talk about this is the 30th day, believe it or not, since Trump's inaugural.
Seems like 6 years, doesn't it?
It's amazing. But already, so, too early to talk about legacy, but something that will be a big part of his second term legacy, I think, is DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. And Tom, we have a front page article today from the Washington Free Beacon that reports that there is a $2 billion with a B dollar earmark. This was found by DOGE for a green group that is linked to Democratic activist Stacy Abrams. So, Tom, what is this group and what did they do to merit a $2 billion set aside from the Biden administration as Biden was heading out the door.
You know, when I first saw this story come across, I was on X last night, and I said, turned to my wife, I'm like, this can't be true. I mean, it can't be true. I mean, it's sort of beggars belief, right? You've got, so the EPA parks $20 billion in an offshore account to try and get it out of the reaches of the Trump administration and DOGE.
Wait,
and then
it's not an offshore account, Tom. It's a bank account.
a bank account.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But to try and basically get it sort of, moved aside, and they doled out all these grants, and then we start digging through them and find out that one of these grants is to a Stacy Abrams connected group that had like $100 in revenue or something. I mean, this is a brand new group that had basically, very little happening. And they were gifted with this $2 billion grant. It's amazing. And it just, it speaks to just sort of the insidery, swampy nature of these organizations and how they're connected. And as what Carl, correct me if I get this, was it Michael Kinsley, or someone of that nature, Carl, said, like, it's what's most astonishing is what's legal in Washington. It's the most disgusting stuff that you can imagine. And this is another example of that. I mean, it's ridiculousness.
Yeah. So I agree with you. When I saw that story, I didn't quite believe it either. But, one of the great things about the interweb is you can go online, and there is something called a Form 990, which is an IRS form that nonprofits have to file with the government. And you can find it for any nonprofit. You can find it online. So I found the 990 for this, and it is called Power Forward Communications. And you're right. This was the most amazing thing. They had they have $100 in income in 2023. That's it. And now they have a $2 billion grant. It is a coalition group. So the members are some which I've never heard of before, the Enterprise Community Partners, Rewiring America, which I think that's one of Stacy Abrams' groups, but Habitat for Humanity and the United Way are also members of this group. But Carl, what do you make of it? And, should this money be clawed back? I guess that's the other question.
Well, I had several reactions to it. I saw it. We all saw it this morning. And the first thing I did, and this is sort of the sign of the times, I went to, okay, it's the, this small startup, conservative news outlet that punches above its weight. I'm not criticizing them in any way, but I thought, all right, but maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's a context I need to know. So, I go to the New York Times. Well, they don't, it does, all the news that's fit to print didn't fit in their paradigm. Washington Post didn't have it. AP didn't have it. And so it reminded me of, sort of how partisan and tribal the media's become. I wanted to see this filtered through somebody, and again, not criticizing the scoop that is the Daily Beacon guy.
Washington Free Beacon.
Washington Free Beacon, yeah.
Free Beacon, yeah. Not casting aspersions, but a sort of veteran reporter, maybe somebody, remember Morton Mintz and these people, Andy, who really knew the federal budget and could kind of explain. Maybe it was, in other words, maybe it's not as bad as it looks, but there's no coverage of it. So then,
so it is as bad as it looks.
It might be. And Andy goes, Andy does his own research. He's a veteran journalist, look at the 1099, but the 1090 form. But what it reminds people is when the Democrats are shrieking about, Elon Musk, they've got this privacy, strikes me as a red herring, but Elon Musk is going through your personal information. They're saying all of these things. But what they're not responding to is this level of fraud that's being found, and the level of waste, and just the level of insider dealing. Now, maybe this isn't fraud. Maybe it's not even waste. But it certainly is insider dealing. And these figures, Tom mentioned an old Washington line. This is attributed to Everett Dirksen, but I once tried to run it down, and I don't think he even said it. Okay. A million here, billion here, billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Mm-hmm. Well, when we're talking about real money in a country that's running a $2 trillion deficit, and when you see, Scott Pelley and some of these guys, he's a good, he's a veteran journalist, covered the White House with him. I have a lot of respect for him, but they couch these interviews they're doing with these people, like from USAID. But this is only 1% of the budget. Well, you start adding up all these 1% of the budget where they're giving billions away and nobody seems to know where it's going, it seems irresponsible. It seems to underscore the need for what Elon Musk and Trump are trying to do, which is get a handle on this runaway federal spending.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about this group, they do have a website. You can go to their website. They were actually advertising for, I think, a CFO and a chief of communications or something. So I don't know, but they're kind of staffing up.
What are the salaries on those jobs, Andy?
I can only imagine, but I might be sending in my application. I mean, it's
yeah, but here's the point, if I may interrupt. I mean,
yes.
is that you would not get that job because you're not a Democrat and you're not connected in Democratic circles.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's going on here is you've got these huge sums of money that are getting shoveled through the federal bureaucracy, which is 95% Democrat leaning and against Republicans and against Trump and against DOGE and against Elon Musk. And that's part of the problem is that they're, these organizations are all, they blossom in part because they're all part of the same sort of democratic blob. It's like a patronage operation.
Yeah, but Tom, that doesn't seem what's going on here. This is not the bureaucracy. This is the Biden administration, the Biden White House, the Biden EPA. These are political appointees earmarking this money and funnel it out, out the door. So
right.
I mean, let's not
to Democratic affiliated NGOs. Right?
I know that, but let's be careful what we're saying here. There's people at the EPA who are hired or scientists, and they're trying to follow the law and prevent the nation's rivers from being polluted. And they're there, and they had nothing to do with this. This is politics.
Right.
It was a member of the EPA who was talking about, throwing gold bars off the Titanic. That's what, according to Lee Zeldin,
a political appointee, Tom.
Yes.
Not a bureaucrat, not a civil servant.
Yes. Political appointee and bureaucrat, are those not interchangeable?
They're not interchangeable.
Oh, okay.
This guy, Elon Musk, has declared war on the civil service, and we should.
Carl, different topic, really. I mean, the idea that there's a war on the civil services is something you can debate. This looks to be just pure and simple graft. And what I would like to see from a reporter, and I'm putting it out there, I would like to see what the RFP that was submitted. I would like to see the response to the RFP. I would like to see the plan. I would like to see the budget of what they were going to do with $20 billion, how they plan to spend it, how complete that plan was, because it better have been a pretty good plan.
Yeah. And after we're done here, I'll call the Washington Post and tell them to get right on it.
Good. All right. Well, I guess I won't hold my breath then. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And Carl, in one of his first actions as HHS Secretary, RFK Jr. released guidance on Wednesday that narrows the definition of biological sex, and it aligns the agency more closely with this January executive order signed by President Donald Trump. Kennedy said on Wednesday that these new definitions restore what he calls, quote, biological truth to the federal government. And he added the prior administration's policy of trying to engineer gender ideology into every aspect of public life is over. What do you make of the new guidelines? And do you agree with them, I guess?
Well, am I going to have to stop telling people my pronouns are he and him? Am I going to be in trouble with the feds if I keep doing that?
I think it will be optional now.
Okay. Listen, this is the Democrats got way over their skis in the culture wars on this one issue, and the Republicans never stopped reminding them of that. Bobby Kennedy was always a Democrat, Bobby Jr. until recently, but he's now aligned with Trump on this. There's two ways to look at this. The first way is this is sort of common sense, and it's always the way it was, and there's no real harm there. Another way to look at it, though, if you're an actual transgender person, an adult, not a kid, let's not talk about kids. That's a whole nother subject. You're starting to think, why is the federal government singling me out? What's the issue here? What do they want from me? What do I have to worry about? And Donald Trump's got involved. President Trump's gotten involved in, mandating plastic straws instead of paper straws, and New York's commuter, tax. And now we're weighing into sort of every facet of American life. There are legal issues here with the government, on Title IX, who can participate in sports and who can't. But you can't just wish away the whole idea of transgender people, and you can't legislate it away, and you certainly can't issue an executive order making it go away. So, I get that this is probably popular, but it's going to end up in court, and it may not be workable.
Tom?
All right, Tom, rebuttal time.
Well, I mean, listen, this is an important sort of, it's a small thing, it's a symbolic thing, but it's also important. And this is not to demean or dismiss sort of, transgender adults. Again, let's just keep it to adults, but to say that, and this is to Bobby Kennedy's point, like there is a truth here. The truth needs to be spoken. Right. And you do not.
Wait, what's the truth?
The truth is that men are men and women are women. And
what's a man who's had
hold
surgery,
on a second, Carl,
has had surgery and gone through the process and no longer has male genitalia and dresses as a woman, presents as a woman, lives her life as a woman, and has been accepted by society as a woman.
Carl,
what
the
is
idea that represents half a percent of the hold on. That represents 0.5% of the population, 1% of the population, and we all have to pretend like that women aren't women and women are birthing persons, and there are no more vaginas. There are what the previous administration, the linguistic sort of gymnastics that they went through and inserted all of this stuff into the language of the federal government to accommodate 0.5% or 1%, and everybody else has to deal with this new reality, which is not actual reality. I mean, that's absurd. You can speak truth and you can still say, look, this doesn't attack transgender people. It just states a sort of fundamental truth. And that doesn't in any way demean or dismiss, transgender adults. And that's why I think this is important. It's sort of rolling back the excesses that the previous administration got pushed into by the left wing of their party. And so I think this is the pendulum swinging back, and I agree with it. I think it's a good thing.
Well,
I'm a little worried it's swung back too far, and that's what we have to be vigilant about, Tom.
Well, I want to talk about Gayle King for a minute here. She's the CBS anchor, and she was on CBS the other day, and she was blaming the Trump administration for the recent airplane crashes. She was interviewing the Delta CEO at the time. His name is Ed Bastian. He knocked it down, but Congressman Eric Swalwell on Monday said this. He said, "Trump is president. President Trump is in charge of air safety. All crashes are Trump's fault." Carl, what do you think? Any way to run an airline? Or
Eric Swalwell is a sort of documented imbecile, and that kind of stuff just. Yeah. My reaction to that is I'm channeling Tom Bevan. I hate that kind of talk. It's intemperate and it's dishonest and it's stupid.
Tom,
but
strong.
Oh
wait, here's the but. I'm sorry, we can't miss this.
But Gayle King's not the only one who said this. The CNN anchorwoman said it, and Scott Jennings interrupted her. The Democrats have been saying it, not just Eric Swalwell. A friend of mine wrote on his Facebook page, his good friend, Trump should answer for this. And what's behind it is there were some layoffs. There's some at the FAA. The FAA administrator says it's between 300 and 400 people, and none of them they're involved in maintenance and ancillary duties. None of them have anything to do with safety. Yeah, but if you're going to make, if you're going to go,
but go ahead.
If you're going to, all right. But if you're going to go around and make cuts, if you're going to cut the jobs of people and you don't know who their names are or what they do, you're leaving yourself open to some of these criticisms. That's my butt.
A subtle butt from Carl Cannon. Tom Bevan, what do you think?
I mean, this is the Democrats are grasping at straws to try and attack Trump, and this is something that I think will backfire on him. I don't think anybody believes that Trump is responsible for, Representative Jasmine Crockett said it. I think on The View, she said, "Oh, Trump's in charge and planes are falling out of the sky." I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of Democrats that are saying this, and obviously we're seeing it reflected in the media. And you can do a quick Google and find out that Joe Biden, I think more planes crashed in under the first 4 weeks of his administration when he took over. I mean, it's just preposterous.
I don't think so.
Well, that's the number I saw. I will not vouch for it, but it's a preposterous idea to suggest that a president is responsible for these plane crashes. And in fact, what we're finding out, not shockingly, is this plane crash that happened in Toronto might have been, a female inexperienced pilot who was landing this plane and might have landed it too roughly and collapsed the landing gear. So there's more investigations that need to be done. But the idea that somehow this is Donald Trump's fault, it's all Donald Trump's fault, it's not going to work, and it makes the Democrats look kind of silly, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the exchange with the Delta CEO, this guy Ed Bastian, was interesting because you can imagine if you're the head of Delta after a crash like this, your number one job is to make people feel safe about flying. So when she said, gee, isn't this aren't people less safe because of what Donald Trump is doing to the FAA? He had to bat that down pretty hard, and he did. I will
Yeah,
say.
but you notice he didn't go where Tom went. He didn't say, "Oh, it's because we hire women pilots."
Yeah, no, he didn't say women.
Say that.
He did not say women can't drive.
God bless him.
Which, just for the record, Tom, you might be out there alone on that one.
Well, listen,
I'm waiting to hear from our viewers and listeners on that one. But anyway, this is it, Carl, though, an indication too, just of, again, 30 days into this administration, and the Democrats are really haven't found their issue. And when you think of it that way, is there something shaping up that is an issue? I have a theory. I want to hear yours. That could be the sort of Achilles heel for Trump. That they can latch on and really go after him.
I have a couple ideas, but what's funny about that is we're assessing this presidency after 30 days. It's crazy. Now, that's not our fault. He's done more in 30 days than most presidents do in 4 terms. But there are a couple things. The first thing is inflation's still a problem. Now, he inherited it, but he's not talking about it. That's the same mistake Joe Biden made. You're starting to see as a Democratic talking point and pushed by Democratic Party allies on the various news stations, that there's polls that show people would like him to do more. He's not doing enough for inflations. That's the first thing. The other thing is that I know you guys think I'm I don't know, inside the Beltway guy on this, but some of these budget cuts. There was a story I saw in a Minnesota paper, rural newspaper from Minnesota. War hero, guy out of the military, lost his job at the VA, loved his job. The government has hiring preferences that require you under the law to give, there's preferences, and some of them are racial, but some of them are veterans. And so veterans now, military veterans, combat veterans, are losing their jobs in this sweep. I think that, and maybe some of the agricultural stuff, that, if it comes across that they're firing people willy-nilly and delighting in it, I think that's the other possible thing where public opinion starts to turn.
Tom?
I agree with that. And we talked about this before, like Trump's getting into stuff now, like Social Security, and where I think more people are sensitive to that than they are to foreign aid or whatever. And so he runs a risk there that he could cross into an area where he doesn't, the public sort of turns against him a little bit. But I think right now, by and large, he's still got support and momentum from his early moves. And so we'll see. But
yeah,
right now, I think he's on solid ground.
Yeah, well, there is this new CNN poll that just came out today and does show that his job approval rating is about as high as it ever was in his first term already. He's still under 50%, but I think it's like 48% or something like that. But to Carl's point, I mean, the economy, people, I don't know what people would have expected after 30 days, but
he's got a couple more months of
yes,
leeway on the economy before people start getting really, into him on inflation. So,
but
and I don't know why he would talk about it. I mean, I guess he could say, listen, we know it's a problem. We're working on it.
Right.
But he's overwhelming people with all this other stuff right now.
Well,
Yeah.
and the other thing, Andy, is, he vowed to end the war in Ukraine, and he's
Mhm.
off to a very uncertain start there. And so I think everybody's watching that.
Yeah.
He also has had, sort of saber rattling comments about Hamas in Gaza. So it's not an easy job, and it's not an easy time to be president.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom. And Carl, there is an article in Politico today about Donald Trump. The headline is "Long Live the King. Trump increasingly embraces monarchical imagery." Monarchical, that's a hard word to say, but there it is, monarchical. He
I
did
would have
say
just said image of the monarchy, but
well, I don't write the headlines at Politico, so but he did send out this tweet, or whatever you call it these days, social post. Congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. This was Trump, I guess, on Truth Social. Long live the king. He's posted this image of himself wearing a crown. What do you make of all this? I mean, long live King Trump. What do you think?
well, and he's quoting Napoleon favorably.
Right. Yes. Right.
Yeah, he's comparing himself to Napoleon. And so he's the state. The state can't go.
What he said was, "He who saves his country does not violate any law."
Yeah,
that was what he
a
said.
sentiment attributed by Balzac 9 years after Napoleon's death to Napoleon. And we can't find the exact Napoleon source, but it's certainly how he acted. So here you guy, the king thing was a crown on his head. Now it's a spoof of Time magazine, but this country was formed in opposition to a king. The Declaration of Independence goes on for 30 paragraphs about how much we detest kings, one king in particular, but not King Trump, King George III. And Napoleon, who was the most villainous, character in Europe till Hitler came along. Now he's favorably, he's quoting him approvingly, like he can do no wrong. He's in charge. He's the man at the head of the state. I've been going back and forth on this. First of all, my first reaction is Trump's just trying to irritate his adversaries. This is like next level trolling, and he's the best in the world at it. Then I start to think, okay, he doesn't like Zelensky. He likes Putin. He admires President Xi. He played footsies in his first term with that, person in Korea. I don't even know what to call him. And the liberals always said, "Oh, this guy's comfortable around autocrats." So, you think maybe he'd tread a little carefully there, but he's not.
Tom, high level trolling or something else?
Or megalomania, Tom.
Most definitely high level trolling. Carl, you fall for the bait every time. I mean, you were just like, yeah, oh man, every single time you fall for it. I mean, look, Trump he is a funny guy. He can be very funny. And I take that kind of stuff in the spirit of him just being, trying to get the goat of his critics. And it very often he does, and they freak out. I'm not talking about you in this instance, Carl, but certainly folks on the left, they see that kind of stuff and they just absolutely and we get another round of that. And look, that's been one of his superpowers since he came on the scene, is getting his critics to overreact to everything. We talked about this when he first came into office. Everything was a 5-alarm fire. Every single thing he did. And it was the end of democracy, and it was this and it was that. And then pretty soon you so quickly get desensitized to all that you can't really tell what, if everything's a 5-alarm fire, then nothing is, right? What's important, what's not important, if people are freaking out. And this is one of those things that
I guess
have a chuckle and move on. I mean, he's not going to be a king. We don't have kings.
All right.
Don't worry about it, Carl. Don't lose any sleep over that one.
Okay. I'll sleep on that one. I'll think, but maybe his superpower is saying things that are so outrageous, just the most outlandish stuff, and getting people to excuse it. Maybe that's his superpower.
Well, I do think that there's so much of the sort of professional wrestling around Trump, that when he does stuff like this, it seems to me it's very, very much in that vein. It's like,
Let's get Sean Trendy back here.
I know, Andy, welcome back. I could use it. Glad to have you, buddy. I was getting my brains beat out yesterday.
Well,
I'm back to losing
right.
2-1 votes. I can see.
One more thing we'll talk about, and this is this tragedy, this Hamas release of the 4 remains of the Israeli hostages, included the body of a mother and her 2 sons. The 2 sons are 9 months and 4 years old when they were abducted, along with the remains of an 84-year-old man. Carl, Tom, I'll ask you. The 4 caskets were displayed alongside 2 missiles. There was a poster depicting Netanyahu as a vampire. Just a horrific tableau. And one of the shocking things about it was prior to the ceremony, the coffins had to be scanned for explosives because they were afraid that they had been booby-trapped.
Something Hamas has done previously, by the way.
Yeah, so it does make it difficult to believe that these negotiations over phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire will get anywhere, but they are set to start next week. What'd you make of the day's events?
Yeah, I mean, we go from something that's very sort of funny and lighthearted to talking about something that was absolutely just evil. There's no other word to describe this, and it really is, I think, a stain on not just Hamas, but all of the Palestinians that were there, including children that were dancing around, they're blaring music, celebrating, clapping. I mean, what sort of, how warped does your morality have to be to celebrate the murder? And I know Hamas says, well, this was an Israeli airstrike. And quite frankly, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt on any of this stuff anymore.
I don't believe them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but even if it was, the point being to dance around and celebrate that is just, it is so despicable that it really does almost defy words. And this is the place that we're supposed to be saving. These are the people that we're supposed to be, saving. It was a terrible scene, and I think it really puts a line not just to all the supporters of Hamas, but all these protests that went on college campuses all around the country that were being supportive of the Palestinian people and Hamas. It's just it's terrible.
Well, Carl, I know you're going to talk to Judy Miller in the next block about this, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what Tom said. And the other thing that was depressing for another reason, not just the depravity of it, but if you're an Israeli and you're seeing this, you must think, how can the world expect us to live next to these people? They've shown who they are. They're celebrating this savagery. So it's very depressing and ominous. And it made, President Trump said that, the craziest thing, we get rid of the Gazans, they can go somewhere else and rebuild it. And the thought occurs that's a tempting solution. I know it's not practical, but you see why people would think this.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, though, Carl's going to talk to Judy Miller, a journalist, about this very subject. So don't go away. We'll be back after this.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics. Talking now with Judy Miller, an old friend and a great reporter, an expert on the Middle East. Judy, those scenes we saw today were grisly and depressing. I want to get your reaction and ask you some questions about the ramifications.
Carl, I think that we've gotten used to the macabre ceremonies that Hamas has been staging as they return each living or dead hostage to the Israelis. But the effect of this within Israel has just been shattering. I've been speaking to my Israeli friends today, and it's tantamount to reliving October 7th all over again. And it has these ceremonies have intensified the fury both at the Israeli government and its failure to protect these people, and also the fury at how long it's taken to bring them home. That being said, for those who are alive, the joy, the reunions are overwhelming. But this past 400 days, the shattering of Israel's sense of security is something that the country is going to have to live with for a long, long time. And yes, I think it will have profound repercussions.
Well, I was looking at those two redheaded boys. They were always in my thoughts. I mean, they should have been known all over the world. They were known by everyone in Israel. Now
Right.
they're dead. That's what we thought. Hamas, of course, says that an IDF airstrike killed them. I don't know that I believe that. I tend to disbelieve it.
No, and you're right. In fact, that's why these bodies are immediately being turned over to is the Israeli Defense Force forensic lab so that they can be analyzed and the cause of death can be determined. Because at this point, I don't think it's safe to believe anything that Hamas says, whether it calls itself the Gaza Health Ministry or any of the other anonymous
Right.
names that it's been using.
All right. Now, so you spent time in Israel, and I look at those pictures. They've got Bibi as a vampire. We talked about this a little bit in the previous segment with Tom Bevan and Andy Walworth, and then they have the four coffins, and then the missiles and this sign, Nazi, Bibi's Nazi army. This sort of grotesque, really anti-Jewish thing. There's no, I mean, anybody would know that. If I'm in Israel, I look at that and I would think, how does the world expect us to live next to these people? I don't mean to sound like Donald Trump, who wants to ship 1.9 million people. I don't know where, but wouldn't that be your reaction?
I think that is the immediate reaction, and that's why, for the moment, the Arab talk in the Arab world, which, as you know, I covered for 30 years, calling for a resumption of talks for a two-state solution, is falling on totally deaf ears in Israel. No one in Israel thinks that a two-state solution is either the answer or desirable at this point. I mean, I want to just call attention to one of the dead hostages who was returned, and that's Oded Lifshitz. He was not only a former journalist, he was, I believe, 84 or 85 years
He
old.
was 83 when he was kidnapped, so we don't know
That's right.
exactly. Yeah,
And we know he's been there for at
yeah,
least a year.
yeah.
But beyond that, he was one of the founders of this very left-wing kibbutz. And one of his philanthropies was actually, it was called the Road to Recovery. And what he did was and his relatives would shuttle sick Palestinians to Israeli hospitals for treatment. And this was one of the hostages who was taken, one of the people who was taken. So if the people who wanted to make peace become the targets and the kind of the
Victims.
the
Yeah.
victims of
Yeah.
this, how can any Israeli be expected to say, oh yes, I think a two-state solution and living side by side with Palestinians is a good idea? That being said, you have Palestinians who are still calling for it. You also have Israeli politicians who are still calling for it. One of the former prime ministers who has said again and again, there is no alternative to the two-state solution. And
Well, Judy, I've always thought that myself, but what kind of country would this be? Would Hamas be in charge of it? Would be armed to the teeth? Would it have an army? Would it have a constitution like Hamas's charter that calls for the destruction of Israel? Would it have preachers saying that every Jew anywhere in the world should be killed? Is that the country? That's not exactly the Declaration of Independence,
Exactly. And, the Israelis, even if they were to make a deal with a Palestinian leadership, which would recognize them and recognize their right to exist in the Jewish state, even if they would do that, if there are, quote, free elections in Palestine, which of course there have almost never been, who's to say that a group like Hamas does not come into power again? I was noticing, for example, that within the past 48 hours, the head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad has met with the president of Iran, congratulating them for their great, quote, victory. I mean, these are not people with whom one can make peace. So I think that Bibi Netanyahu, for all of his faults, when he calls them monsters, is absolutely correct. And I think it mirrors just about mass sentiment now within Israel. I can't imagine anyone sitting down and talking about that as an alternative to continued fighting, if that's at all plausible.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, so President Trump has sort of suggested that Egypt and Jordan, other Arab countries take Palestinians. And this has been suggested for 40 years. They first of all, they don't want to go. And secondly, these governments don't want them. But it strikes me that the Arab world is going to have to do something. What constructive role could the Saudis play, or the Egyptians, or the King of Jordan? What could they do to help?
Well, the King of Jordan searching for an alternative to President Trump's idea that Jordan should become Palestine, which is
Right.
basically what would happen if 2 million Gazans descended upon a country that is already 70% Palestinian. I mean, he has already proposed taking in children, several thousand children, for medical treatment in Jordan. And that's his alternative to
Well, yeah,
what
he
is
said
unacceptable
he
to
said
them.
he'd take 2,000 children, but until October 7th, those children were being cared for, most of them by Israeli
In
hospitals.
Israeli
So that
hospitals.
seems like it's not heavy lifting.
But so far, President Sisi of Egypt, and I was there last year and talked to senior Egyptian officials about this. They're absolutely adamant about the Sinai not being the second home for Palestinians who are seeking shelter, but also an effort to regroup and fight again.
Yeah.
Look, the Egyptians have just fought successfully a decade-long war against their version of Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was, of course, the mother of all Islamist organizations, with Israeli help. They've been battling them in the Sinai. It's taken them 10 years to quell that rebellion. So the last thing they want is a bunch of Palestinians with understandable grievances and hatred for Israelis sitting there stewing in Sinai, in northern Sinai, waiting to return, or deciding that they could off President Sisi and take over Egypt, which is what the Palestinian MO has been to this point whenever they've been welcomed into a country. Look at Lebanon, look at Syria, look at Jordan. So we have really a conflict now which has ratcheted up, which has no obvious solution. And I can honestly tell you, after 40 years of working both on both sides of the line, of both the Arabs and the Israelis, that I really think this is one of the worst moments I've ever seen in the Middle East, and certainly one that offers absolutely the fewest prospects for any kind of peaceful solution that I've come across in a long, long time.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought seeing these pictures today.
Yes,
I'm-
these pictures are horrific.
Yeah. You're listening to Judy Miller talk with me. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics. Judy, we've got about 1 minute left. Is there something the Saudis can do? They want to get the king there has this, he's got this murder rap on his jacket, as we used to say when I covered the courts. He wants to rehabilitate himself. Is there something that the kingdom could do to intercede in some way? I know they want to be a rival to it. They want to counter Iran. So it seems like it might be in their interest. But what could the Saudis do?
Well, no, I don't think the Saudis can do anything except offer what they've always done, offer the money to rebuild Gaza. That they can do, except they too are strapped and beginning to cut back on some of their own projects like Neom, the new city, along the sea there. I mean, look, there is no there is nothing that the Saudis can do. Some Trump officials are talking about, well, maybe we can have an Arab peacekeeping force. But having watched the Saudis and the Egyptians at war, I don't think that that's going to be reassure any Israeli that an Arab peacekeeping force would be able to keep peace and not be bought off or overwhelmed by some pretty determined Palestinians who want to go on fighting, want to go on making sure that the one-state solution results in their triumph, whether it takes 5 years or 10 years or 50 years.
Well, if it's 50 years, you and I won't be here to see it. We've been listening to Judith Miller, expert on the Middle East and a great reporter, former New York Times woman, author, and just an all-around good person. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics. And you've been listening to us on SiriusXM Radio. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time, 3 p.m. in the West, 6 p.m. here in the East. Good evening.